Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here. I think we have almost everyone. I'm trying to put a little icebreaker here into my PowerPoint. It's been a long time since I've talked to you guys, but I really appreciate you coming to the webinar. It's been a long time since I've done a webinar. I travel a lot these days. I do a lot of teaching, a lot of conferences, a lot of project work, a lot of all of the things. So I haven't had time to do a webinar in a long time. And just so happens I was home this week. And so I'm super happy to be here with all of you guys. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Annie Cahill. Oh, okay, James. My name's Annie Cahill. I'm a public safety technical consultant with Datamark. I have been with our company for, it'll be 6 years next month. And I have a background in GIS, addressing, public safety. So that's my background. And give me just a second. I'm gonna get our little icebreaker here. Sorry for the delay, because I just remembered it. All right, let me share my screen. Let me know if you guys can see this, because already you're being way too quiet, and that's totally my fault. But okay, so let's see. Can you guys see my presentation? Can you see my screen? I got to swap.
Yes.
All right. So you guys can see. All right. So I just want to test the chat. It looks like everybody has access to the chat, which is amazing. And I know it's a little late, but we're still in February, right? So we can still do the candy things, and it's even better now because it's all on clearance, right? So why don't you guys take a look at this map? I know it's a little bit vague. I don't want to believe that Virginia's favorite Valentine's candy was conversation hearts. That's a little sketch. But what do you guys think about this map? What was your favorite candy? Of course, we are coming up on arguably one of the best candy seasons, which is like springtime. Whether you celebrate Easter or not, like the candy is candying at Easter, and even at Halloween. I don't know, it's a toss up for me. What do you guys think? Fun. Hi, Ken. Good to see you. Yeah, I thought this was cute. This was actually on our, I know, James, me too. I don't really eat a lot of candy, but Rich, yeah. Conversation hearts. Hey, Lillian. Yeah, it's good to see a lot of you. Really good. I'm so happy that I could be here on this webinar this week with you guys. I'm sorry I couldn't make the boundary webinar. Daniel, that is accurate. Conversation chalk. I love that. But yeah, I'm super excited about Easter because I will sneak, a Reese's egg. Cadbury mini eggs are my favorite. I know, Michael, I don't know what's up with that. Yeah, Christina, I know it's definitely not conversation hearts. Like, where's the peanut butter love? Anyway, but I wanted to thank you all again for being here. And thank you for entering the webinar chat. So let me go to, let's see here. I want to make sure I have the right share up. Do you see? I'm so confused. I feel like I haven't done a webinar in so long now. I can't.
You're good, Annie.
Okay. Is it just showing the notes, or is it showing?
Nope, it's just showing your slide.
Okay, cool. That's great. You think I've never done a webinar before. All right. So why don't you guys drop in the chat and let me know where you're here from? Are you addressing? Are you public safety? Are you kind of like all of the above? GIS, all of the above. A lot of you guys are, wow, you guys are fast. Okay, perfect. Well, I'm super happy that you're here. And it was my understanding that based on the feedback that we received kind of at the end of last year, that we're kind of looking at going back to basics a little bit because a lot of folks, and also let me know if you're new to like NG9-1-1. I don't know what everybody's experience level is. I know a lot of you on the webinar are here from different areas. Hi, Regina. So if you guys could just let me know if you're new to NG9-1-1, because it's my understanding that we kind of wanted to go back to basics a little bit with our foundational knowledge of things. And I really think that a lot of that starts with the workflows. So just a little bit about what I do. I already told you what my background is, but what I do for DataMark is I actually run all of our company's strategic planning services and boundary facilitation services. I also do a lot of teaching. I do webinars when I'm available, and I really enjoy talking to people about NG9-1-1 and what that means. So there's this really big focus in NextGen about data. And I guess I'll swap slides and let's kind of talk about that some more. So we're going to talk about the roles within the PSAP and NG9-1-1 for the addressing authority, GIS data managers, and public safety folks, your addressing workflow, the data management workflow, and then public safety workflow. So the reason that we're talking so much about workflows is because workflows are ultimately what shapes the data. There is a heavy focus on GIS data in next generation 911 because NG9-1-1 does not work without GIS data. It's the engine for the entire vehicle. And that's a huge paradigm shift for how things are done today. So let me go ahead and talk about GIS and 911 call routing today. So typically when you are in the PSAP, can you guys see the full slide here? Because I feel like I'm swapped. You see the full slide, Taryn? Or is there like a weird notes?
Nope, I can only see your slide. You're good.
Okay, thanks. I have 3 screens, okay? I'm not the most tech person. So anyway, in the PSAP today, most people in the PSAP are seeing GIS as a reference, right? It's coming through on different maps. So you have, your CAD map, your 911 map, wherever the call is plotting, but GIS currently it's a reference, right? It's not actually taking any kind of an active role in the call routing process. So when a 911 call comes into a PSAP today, it's really routed by the MSAG and ALI databases, which are they're only tabular databases that are owned by the telephone companies, and they are notoriously inaccurate or incomplete. And they're what we would call legacy data sets. So the MSAG and ALI, like I said, are owned by the telephone companies, and PSAPs and other data management authorities like addressing authorities, GIS folks, you can generally make recommendations for how to update an MSAG or something, but typically you don't own that data. So the problems that are within those databases generally persist in the data. And so also the NextGen 9-1-1 is supposed to address that. By the way, we'll talk about that here in just a second. But the GIS data is only used today as a reference. It's not actually taking an active role in the call routing process. So we use GIS pretty much everywhere in the local government environment, and the PSAP is no exception. So like I said, today, the call routing is accomplished through the MSAG and ALI databases. You may provide, do you guys provide updates to your MSAG and ALI databases? Go ahead and drop a yes or no in the chat. Or maybe you've tried and been unsuccessful. What's wild is I was in New Mexico last year giving a presentation, and there were 2 ladies. One was sitting right behind the other one. They have the same telephone company, one lady says, yeah, I update my MSAG on a regular basis and they get back to me right away and approve my edits. But the lady sitting behind her said, yeah, I do the same thing and my edits, I never hear anything or my edits get rejected. So it's kind of like hit or miss about whether or not those edits are going to be accepted, right? But this is really important because this is how calls are routed today. And I know you guys hear in the news that calls can get misrouted and we have multiple transfers and that adds time onto a 911 call. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in our legacy system today that is problematic. So you guys do provide updates. Some people say yes, some people say no. It's pretty typical response. This is existing call routing today. Look, I'm kind of old, but I'm not this old. Like I don't pretend to know how all of the different things are being accomplished in the legacy call routing. But I will tell you that in the NG9-1-1 call routing, we have to rely on the GIS data. So let's get to that because that's going to be the most important thing. Training remains foundational. Yes, that's right, Ronald. You're exactly right. Training is important to all things. So drop in the chat if you guys are using GIS in any capacity. Maybe you're an editor, maybe you are an administrator, maybe you are responsible for, maybe you just add address points in. Maybe you're just a viewer, right? Maybe you just have a mapping system that you reference. All of the above. Okay, cool. Barbara, we do it all day, every day, right? Editing daily. Yes, Lillian, I know you have a lot of responsibility where you are. A lot of my friends from Alabama here today. Yeah, absolutely. So everyone uses GIS, whether you know that you're using it or not, right? We would all be safe to say that GIS is really a key component to a lot of our day-to-day operations throughout the government. Yeah, the parcels are extremely important. I talk about parcels a lot when we talk about addressing. So the layers that are required for NG9-1-1, we have address points, road center lines, and then we have our PSAP boundary, which is the public safety answering point. That is the actual call routing boundary. And then we have individual service boundaries for fire, law, and EMS, which are used for selective transfer. And then, of course, the provisioning boundary, which is kind of like a geofence that tells our spatial interface where basically where the responsibility lies for that data management and maintenance. So how many of you guys manage this data? And I will tell you that individual service boundaries for the fire law, EMS, the provisioning, and the PSAP boundary, those are all really next generation 911 layers that are going to be required that are not something that you may already have developed. You do all of those, Barbara? Yeah, of course you do. You don't manage those boundaries, right? So all of these are going to be required. Now, there are some that are required, strongly recommended and recommended, but these are the ones that are required to make NG9-1-1 function. Entering addresses, yes. So addresses and roads are pretty much legacy data sets that we have and we've been working with. We also have ESNs, which are still very relevant, by the way, and we'll talk about that when we start talking about legacy data a little bit more. But the PSAP boundary is what's actually going to be routing the 911 call instead of the tabular databases that we discussed earlier. So I think that's going to be the biggest thing, is that you have to understand that, like I mentioned earlier, call routing in NG9-1-1 doesn't work without GIS data. Okay, so that's a huge paradigm shift, because now our data is being asked to do something that it's never had to do before, with a layer or a level of accuracy and completeness that it's never had to have before. So it's incredibly important that our GIS data is the most accurate, the most up-to-date, and the most complete that we can provide to our, not only the folks that are dispatching calls, but also for our first responders. Remember that GIS, I don't know how, I'm an old GIS girl, so GIS as a profession kind of originated from planning and zoning offices, because it was originally designed and established as a land management. Okay, so a lot of GIS data started in planning and development, and you can go there if you're not sure where some of these data layers are. You can absolutely go to planning and development, tax assessor, maybe public works, a lot of people will have these different data sets available that you can start with. And a lot of people start with the county boundary as the kind of like a first draft of their PSAT boundary. So GIS folks on the call, and I know there are a lot of you here, but for GIS folks, you are kind of geospatial first responders. That's kind of what I'm calling you guys. If you've ever been to any of my presentations or other webinars in person or online, you've heard me say this. Because your data is used before a call ever comes into a 911 center, that makes it so you have a very, very important and special role in the entire 911 call routing process. So it is incumbent on you to learn how to manage your data appropriately so that it can be used for this purpose. Okay, so you're a geospatial first responder. Let me know in the comments if you are familiar with the NINA data model. NINA is the National Emergency Number Association. Let me know if you guys are familiar with the NINA data model. Somewhat, I get a lot of yeses, very familiar. Yes, Ken. Yep, you've heard of it, Greg. That's okay. Okay, so we have a lot of yeses, a lot of kind ofs. So the NINA data model is something that you want to be intimately familiar with, because that's going to help you understand the schema. Now, when we say schema, this is kind of like a term that we're using to really define the qualities of the data to make it do what it needs to do for next gen 911, right? So that's going to refer to the data layers that have to be a part of the data model, which we've already talked about. I gave you the list. And then also the attributes or the fields that are required to be part of that data to make that call routing happen. So you're going to need to manage those required layers to the NINA data model, to the NINA standards. It's going to require a greater level of collaboration. So, working with your addressing authorities, working with your road authorities. If planning and zoning is the one that's assigning the addresses and they're not doing a great job of it, if they're also the ones approving the road names and they're not including the public safety folks, these are huge issues within people's workflows. And this is stuff I've been looking at for literally 6 years. And it's a big concern, right? Because the data is shaped by the workflows that are in place. So generally, when my team and I receive data from someone, we can kind of take a look at the data and understand what the use was. For example, if you're managing your road center line solely in a linear referencing system, that is often not going to work for NG9-1-1 purposes, because it requires that NG9-1-1 requires that the road center lines be split and snapped, where you essentially have an attribute change like at different municipal boundaries and where you have ESN boundaries. So typically people who have a linear referencing system will not be able to use that data set for NG9-1-1. You're going to have to develop a new data set. So this is kind of the stuff that we like to talk about when I write strategic plans for folks. You're also going to be responsible. Part of understanding the NINA standards is also understanding that just because we've always done something a certain way doesn't mean that we can continue to do it that way. And if the business workflows that are in place, if the way that you've been managing the data is not conducive to NG9-1-1, we have to fix that, okay? And we also have to take a closer look at the way that the GIS data is managed spatially and from an attribute and tabular perspective. So that may require a level of remediation and data cleanup. I was going to say raise your hand, but let me know in the chat if you guys have been through any type of data cleanup experience for NG9-1-1, whether it was through Datamark or through another vendor. Like, let me know, have you guys completed that journey? Is that something that you're kind of like looking at as far as we need to get Daniel? Yes, let me know. Let me know if you guys have been a part of that, or if that's something that you're currently researching, if it's something that you're interested in learning about. Because I will tell you, depending on the size of your locality, it takes hundreds and hundreds of hours to remediate your data. And you have to know or understand, do I have that amount of time in my workday to remediate the data? Yes, it is a continuous improvement. And even if your data, even if you get the data cleaned up or remediated to the NINA data standards, you're going to have to continue that effort, right? It's an iterative process. It's not a one and done. So that's going to be part of your role as a GIS professional managing that data for NG9-1-1. You absolutely are going to have to continue maintaining and validating that GIS data, because then you're going to have to publish the data out to others within the organization. So a lot of you will have to think about, well, who does the data need to go out to, right? So obviously, people throughout the enterprise are going to be looking at your roads and your address points, but what are you guys doing from a locality perspective or like a statewide as far as your core services? Have you guys chosen a core services provider? And when I say that, I mean, have you chosen the vendor that's going to route your next gen 911 calls? Like, have you chosen a core services provider? Because you're going to have to provide that data to them. You're going to have to provide the data to your CAD system locally. And that may be at a local level, right? We are working with a lot of folks who have locally selected their core services, but then some folks are actually doing it from a statewide perspective. AT&T, yep. Okay. All right, going live in May. Good luck, Cameron. I like to see it. So as GIS professionals, we are building data for a specific purpose, and that is NG9-1-1. Okay. We have to think about how the business need is going to dictate the resources that are required and what's going to happen for ongoing GIS data maintenance, right? So we have to think about, okay, well, for NG9-1-1, like I said, maybe we're managing our road center lines in a linear referencing system. We may have to figure out another alternative, right? Because we know that NG9-1-1 places all these demands on this data, as far as the splitting and the snapping, and especially for address points. We see a lot of data sets that have duplicate address points because people are attempting to represent sub-addressing, but they're not providing unique address information within those attributes, which is causing duplicate address points. So these are all things that we have to consider. And because we're not using the MSAG and ALI to route calls for next generation 911, we're going to need to work with other stakeholders, sometimes that are our neighbors, right? Neighboring counties, neighboring states, to make sure that our PSAP boundaries are congruent. Meaning that they fit together like the pieces of a puzzle, and that we don't have any intentional gaps and overlaps that can cause issues with call routing, right? We definitely don't want to cause any more problems for call routing using our GIS data. The goal, again, is to get this cleaned up and to meeting the standards so that calls can be routed efficiently and effectively the first time around. So as I mentioned earlier, GIS folks, you're going to need to expand your stakeholder group, right? If you've never been, for GIS people, let me know if you've ever been into your PSAP. If you are managing data for 911, have you been inside of your PSAP? Have you been inside to see the equipment, to see how your data is being used, to watch how these folks are answering 911 calls and how they're actually using your data? I recommend that you do it, because I worked for years managing data for public safety without ever going into the PSAP. So that's kind of wild. But yes, I'm super happy to see that there's a lot of people who have expanded their knowledge to go into the PSAP, and they love it. Most 911 directors will love to, oh yeah, Jenny sat with dispatchers for 8 hours. That's amazing. I highly, highly recommend it. Yes, okay, so Gregory, your GIS department is in the PSAP. That's really good. That's not always the case though. A lot of people are the sole GIS data manager, and you're maybe sitting in IT, and you're managing data for all of these different business needs, but maybe you've never actually seen how it's being used. So I like to see that a lot of you have been in there and seen that. Okay, so working with public safety folks, working with addressing authority. For a lot of you, you may be one and the same. You may be the GIS data manager, the addressing authority, and you might be sitting in public safety, which is like the blue sky scenario, right? So you're all working together and you're all kind of under one roof. But for a lot of you, that's not the case. Some of you have addressing authorities that are in planning and zoning, or in public utilities, or in the tax assessor's office, and that can present some different challenges, right? So let me know in the comments if non-public safety addressing authorities have kind of been an issue for you guys. That is something that I experience quite often when I'm doing strategic planning. I do get a lot of complaints about people not assigning addresses. Matt, thank you for the fishbone. Yes, Christy, it's been an issue. Yeah, I mean, it's a huge issue for a lot of people to have addressing authorities that are not in public safety, who are assigning addresses for different business needs other than public safety. So that's kind of where you would dig into that a little bit within a strategic plan. Some of you on this call have been through strategic planning sessions with me. They can be very informative. They can sometimes be uncomfortable because we're unveiling issues within the workflow, but it's all for a good cause, because we're trying to identify areas where we can improve, right? As a GIS authority, you do need to understand the NINA data model, like we've already discussed, and get involved in the working groups. I would absolutely recommend that, because that's a great way to network. It's a great way to learn very fast how to manage your GIS data. And then also validating your GIS data is incredibly important. In the chat, let me know if you guys validate your GIS data for NG9-1-1, and what do you use? Maybe use VEP, that's Datamark's validation software. I know we have some Oklahoma folks on the call. I know that you guys are using the toolkit. Mark is using VEP. That's great. And maybe you guys use another solution. I'd love to hear about it. Or maybe you don't have a solution and you are looking. What does that mean? Self-validate, Jeremiah. What's that mean? Did you build your own validations? Let me know in the chat if you guys are looking for, oh, hey, Jean. Let me know if you guys are looking for a validation solution, if maybe that's something you guys are trying to research. Tanya, new director, you're trying to learn how to validate. Yes, it can be overwhelming. The good news is that regardless of what vendor you choose, whether it's us or someone else, I know for sure that we will take a look at your data for free. We will do a data assessment and kind of give you that baseline of what you're looking at, as far as like the level of effort to get your data up to the NINA standards. So if you have any questions about that, just let me know. I will put my email in the chat for you guys if you want to reach out. So again, NG9-1-1 is requiring us to provide data at a level of completeness and accuracy that we have never had to have before. It's never had to do what it's being asked to do. It's never had to route a 911 call before. So we want to make sure that the geography, the actual physical attributes, the physicality of the data is matching what is really going on in the real world. The attributes are reflecting, the reality as well. You want to make sure that you have all of the layers that we talked about earlier, the addresses, roads, all of those boundary layers. You want to make sure that the schema, right, all of the fields are present within the schema and that those fields are populated. That's what we mean by accuracy and completeness. There's a lot of different facets to that. So for editing and management, follow the best practices. I will tell you that the first step is to look at your workflows and who's managing that data, because that's going to give you a good idea of where you need to start. I can tell you that a lot of data sets that are managed by planning and zoning, such as address points, those are woefully lacking in the NINA data model standards. So, and that's okay, it's fine, but we need to start working on it, okay? So become familiar with the NINA data model and figure out what needs to be added. Get that field mapping done to know like where you can field map or cross over your attributes with what's required by the standard. Make sure that when you're editing GIS data, you want to make sure that you're understanding how features impact others, because we're looking at this holistically. It's not just about addresses. It's not just about roads. All of these things have a function, right? So when you're adding in a new address at the end of a road center line, you want to make sure that you're looking at the range information and making sure that the ranges reflect all of the address points that are along that road. If you're splitting road center lines, you want to make sure that you're updating the NGUID, which is the NENA Global Unique ID, which helps the next generation core services provider identify on what feature specifically any anomalies are found, okay, when it runs through that validation check. As I mentioned earlier, you do need to break your road center lines at boundaries, municipal boundaries, ESNs, et cetera, and update those attributes. Parsing the address elements is incredibly important. If you have 127 North Main Street Apartment 7 all concatenated in one field, you're going to have to change that. Okay, I highly recommend that you look at the CLDXF document, the Civic Location Data Exchange Format document, which is a standard published by NENA. In the appendices of that document are parsing tables that are incredibly helpful for addresses and also for roads. And again, I can put my email in the chat if you guys want to reach out to me, and I can send you that info. You do want to standardize your attributes, and a good way to do that is by leveraging domains. That avoids any fat fingering, or if you're not the best speller, it keeps it so you could just basically have drop down. You will be required to fully spell out the street name elements for NENA, but also maintain the legacy fields. So you have to spell out avenue, boulevard, street. You have to spell out your pre-directionals, your post-directionals. Any of those things within the data model need to be fully spelled out, but there is still space within the data model. Thank you, Ken. Ken just posted the link to the CLDXF. Go to the very end for the parsing tables for addresses and roads, and I think place names, etc. There are parsing tables in the appendices of that document, which are extremely helpful. But you want to make sure that you are parsing that data appropriately. And we see a lot of people that are using like the Esri address management system, right? It's great, but if you don't have a foundational understanding of how to parse that data, we see data come in all the time that's still wrong because it was parsed incorrectly, okay? But you're going to need to make sure that you fully spell out those NENA fields, and then you'll also be able to manage the legacy field, the abbreviated values within the model as well. I'm trying to do a good job of keeping an eye on the chat and my presentation, so I'm sorry if I'm skipping any questions. All right, so let's talk about workflows. Drop in the chat, let me know, why are you not able to get your data ready for NG9-1-1 or your workflows? Is it just a lack of knowledge, right? Like, I don't know what to do to get ready. I have no idea where to start. I don't know who's managing data within my locality. I don't know what an appropriate workflow is for addressing, because I can tell you that's a huge issue for a lot of folks that I work with. Staffing can be an issue, right? Yeah, number of people and time. Yeah, staffing is a huge, because many of you, as I'm preaching to the choir, many of you are doing multiple jobs, right? You're managing the CAD, you're updating GIS data, you could be answering 911 calls. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's going on. So the hours that are required to get the data ready and to keep the quality up to where it needs to be, it's a challenge to balance all of that. Yeah, so you're new to your position, that's completely understandable. Staffing, also balancing the different business needs, right? So a lot of you have CAD systems that may not be ready for NG9-1-1 data. And that's something that we also are dealing with in strategic planning discussions. I talk to people about that stuff all the time. So staffing is obviously an issue. The technology, funding can be a big one. Are silos an issue where you are? I mean, do you have different entities that are managing the GIS data? Are you having an issue with stakeholder engagement? Are you not getting the data? Yeah, I would love to hear more about that. Silos are a huge issue. Again, we can't go into this initiative doing the same things that we've always done. the NG9-1-1 is obliterating that mindset. And I have made very strong recommendations in my strategic plan to often, if things are egregious enough, to actually move the addressing authority out of wherever it is into public safety because it's that bad. And I've seen a lot of wild things. Oh, managing data for smaller municipalities. Yes, Alexander. So I will tell you that two of the most mismanaged components of addressing are the sub-addressing and municipality addressing. Those are, and also municipalities not having GIS resources, right? So that's also a big challenge. So you need to have clearly defined roles and responsibilities. That's really important. Figure out who's doing what. That's like step number one, okay? And then get them all together in a room. Sometimes donuts help or whatever candy of your choice. We already talked about candy earlier. Make sure that you have a path forward for how you're going to manage and edit the data. For the 911 folks, even if you're not the data manager, you are responsible for the quality of that GIS data. You are responsible, okay? So that means, and that's why I'm saying we can't keep doing what we've always done because we're going to get what we've always gotten, right? So you are, as the provisioning authority, responsible for providing the most accurate and complete and most up-to-date data. So you're going to have to expand your stakeholder group and find out who's doing what and talk to these people and bring them into the loop. Sometimes this has not been successful, and I've seen where public safety folks individually have to create a whole new data set just for NG9-1-1 because they're not getting what they need from other agencies. It's unfortunate, but that's just the way that it goes, right? We need to make sure that we have a plan for updating our public safety systems, as well as whoever else is consuming the GIS data. And then risk mitigation, which does involve regular, normal validations. So this is, yeah, the workflow does have to change. That's right, Ken. And you're right, when an anomaly is identified within the data, it has to be fixed within 72 hours. Now, the understanding of what that 72 hours means, that's evolving, right? Like that's something that we're kind of like evolving our understanding on, but you do need to have a quick turnaround on these things. And that goes for address assignment, that goes for correcting addressing issues. I understand if you have to work with property owners. I know that takes a long time. I used to do it. You also need to publish the data out. You need to resolve anomalies. All of that stuff needs to be documented in an SOP, and you need to have a process for that, okay? That is the biggest hurdle to the entire initiative, I would say. And by the way, NG9-1-1 is an overhaul of the entire system, hardware, software, call taking equipment. The GIS data is the heaviest lift. So don't wait for the other stuff because that stuff can be done, fairly quickly. You need to start on your data cleanup now and your workflows now. That's the time is now for that stuff. You don't want all of the infrastructure to be in place and you're playing catch up, in other words. So in a process to get your workflows up to speed, this is kind of the stuff that I would look at as part of a strategic planning process. I would sit people down and look at the addressing process and life cycle, who's doing what, how is it being done. The same with the road center lines, and also talk to your municipalities because again, that tends to be kind of a black hole for addresses. You really should not have missing addresses from your address data set. And if you are not confident in the quality of your address points, if you do think that you're missing address points, reach out to me ASAP because Datamark does have a process whereby we can take your data and identify potentially missing address points. And that's something that people have found very rewarding, including sub-addresses, okay? I'm also gonna sit and talk to public safety and learn basically what's in place for technology, how's the GIS data used, who's updating it, and what does that look like? And then we would also discuss if an NG9-1-1 solution has been implemented like a core services provider. And then from a GIS perspective, we are going to look at the data availability, the quality of that data, the schema, can the schema support NG9-1-1 and how it's being used. Communication is extremely important. Getting everybody in a room to talk about this stuff is very important. You know, your dispatchers are some of your biggest proponents of data quality. They're going to be the biggest resource for you as far as identifying anomalies within your GIS data, because they're using it every day and it's being used for public safety. So your dispatchers, your first responders, make sure that you have something in place for them to report any anomalies to you that they're seeing, whether it's in the data or in real life when they're responding to emergencies, and then take that and make your data better. Okay. There's a huge educational component as well. Datamark offers a variety, in addition to these webinars, Datamark offers a variety of different training courses, including addressing. That's one that I'm teaching kind of everywhere now. Also boundary management. There's a lot of different courses that we teach for these different workflows, and also for NG9-1 GIS data management. So a proper data management workflow, start with the data inventory, figure out what are the layers and how often they're being updated and by whom. Do you need to create layers? What does that look like? I hope that no one on the call, I hope and pray that no one has to create address points or road center lines from scratch. But if you do, that's okay. You have an opportunity to make it the most accurate and complete data set that you possibly can. So figure out what you have versus what needs to be created and what you can actually start with. When you're talking about a PSAP boundary, I want to caution you that I don't want you to look at a PSAP boundary as a county boundary, because it is not. This is purpose-built data. Okay, a PSAP boundary is for routing a 911 call. It's not for taxation. Okay, it's not for figuring out who owes who money and all of that stuff. You can certainly start with a county boundary as a kind of like a rough draft of your PSAP boundary, but again, it's purpose-built GIS data. So you need to make sure that you're looking at this critically in light of the NENA standards and what is the purpose of the GIS data, right? Synchronization between the next gen data and the legacy data is incredibly important. You always hear in NG9-1, oh, the MSAG and ALI is going away. Not really, and not for a long time. Okay, so it is important that you synchronize that data and you have a plan in place for managing and maintaining that data, and then ongoing synchronization and QA. So these are the documents that you guys need to pay attention to. And again, we can, I can provide these to you in links, but the NENA data model, the CLDXF, which Ken linked to in the chat, SSAP is a site structure address point development document. If you're looking at how to develop address points or what's the best way to place those, that's a really good document. It is a little bit stale, but it still has some really good information in it. And then the most recent one is the GIS data stewardship, which was published in fall of 23. And that one, I think I am working on a presentation for that one in the near future. So that's going to kind of demystify that document, because a lot of you have never heard of this, and it's a very, very good document for GIS data management for NG9-1-1. So an ideal data management workflow obviously has defined stakeholders, as we've already discussed. Establishing those authoritative data sets. If you have 8 road center line data sets in use, which one's going to be used for NG9-1-1? Because that's the one that needs to be the most up-to-date, accurate, and complete. It needs to address ongoing validations within the data. What is the remediation plan? If you have someone managing the address points that's different than whoever's managing the road center lines, you need to have a plan in place for how those anomalies are going to get resolved once that data is validated. And then what is your publishing schedule and the feedback portion, which is what I talked about a few minutes ago with your dispatchers and your first responders, providing you information about where the data is maybe inaccurate, so that you can get in there and fix it. So we want you guys to look at synchronizing your MSAG to your GIS data. I would say honestly that the first step should be looking at the boundaries, right? This is always the foundational component, is the boundaries. So focusing on, before anything else, where is the call routed? If you have to copy paste your county boundary, that's fine. But remember that it's not a jurisdictional legal boundary. It is a PSAP boundary. It can and should be adjusted where it needs to be. Okay. Remember, one of the goals of NG9-1-1 is to minimize call transfers. And the way that we do that is by building our PSAP boundary to reflect where the call should be located. We're moving away from routing calls using an MSAG and ALI. We need to transition to the GIS data. And the way that we do that is by building out our PSAP boundary. Okay, so that's step number one, is the PSAP boundary, and then you can build your provisioning boundary, which again is that geofence that says, hey, I'm responsible for data in this area. And then also your service boundaries for fire, law, and EMS. You guys can start with your ESNs if you want. That's a perfect start. But I would say if you are, a lot of times we see people conflate the CAD boundaries, which are used for resource routing, with these ESBs, and they are not the same boundaries. Okay. The CAD boundaries that says, hey, I'm going to send this resource a mile up this interstate should not be the same as, hey, once my call comes into a PSAP, it has to go here for law. Those are two totally separate boundaries. Okay. So get your boundaries where they need to be, and then work on the attribute management and the spatial data management. And again, a proper NG9-1 validation software is going to help you with this. Okay. Parsing, standardizing that data is incredibly important in this process. So that means we take fully spelled out values and we abbreviate them for the MSAG to match what the MSAG has, but then also understanding that the NINA data model fields do need to have the fully spelled out values. We are going to compare the ALI to the address points and the MSAG to the address points. You want those data sets to answer the same questions. Okay, you're always going to have more address points than you do ALI records. But with your MSAG, you should have a really close synchronization there. ALI to road center line, we do as well to make sure that all of the address points are fully encompassed within that road center line range. cutesy graphics. Let me know in the chat if you guys have done a synchronization effort. I hope that you're not just kind of tossing your MSAG and ALI out the window. Please don't do that. You still need to make sure that both data sets are answering the same questions. Trying to, okay. And like I said, you will always have more address points in your GIS than you do ALI records, and that's okay. But you do want to tie a one-to-one match as best you can. Yes, it is time consuming. It absolutely is. Okay, Matt, yeah, that's good. So at least twice per year, yes. And, again, if you are, using a solid NG9-1-1 validation software, that will also help in that process. Ongoing data maintenance. I want to talk to you guys about your annexations because they make me mad. Not because of annexations are annexations, that's fine. But, a lot of you don't have solid workflows in place for how that information is communicated to the GIS data managers, and then how it gets communicated to the 911 authorities. Because a lot of you have told me, even though the PSAP boundary is not the same boundary as the jurisdictional boundary, they're two different boundaries. A lot of you have said, hey, my city boundary has to be the call routing boundary. Okay, well, if you're annexing, you need to keep that in mind, that your official city boundary, your jurisdictional boundary, is not the only one that needs to change. You also need to then change the call routing boundaries. And you also need to make sure that the address points and road center lines involved in the annexation are carrying that new community information. Remember, I talked to you earlier about holistic data management and maintenance. That's what I'm talking about, okay? And then ongoing validation. And I'm not saying like, okay, if you add in one address point per month, yes, they are hard, Jenny, they absolutely are hard. And it's something I've been working with a lot of people on as part of strategic planning, because they often involve a lot of different entities, right? And public safety is almost always an afterthought. So yes, that is very, very challenging. but an ongoing data maintenance plan is very, very important for how you're going to do this. If you add in one address point a month, I'm not saying that you need to, validate your data once a month, but the more you edit, the more you need to validate. Okay. Okie dokie. All right. So next steps, I don't know. We take a look at this stuff. I look at your communication, your GIS data management, any documentation that you guys have, SOPs. Most of you, and I'll go ahead and ask in the chat, but I kind of know the answer. Do you guys have SOPs for addressing process? Do you have SOPs for GIS data management for NG9-1-1? Do you have SOPs for how do different systems get updated with GIS data? So in other words, if you win the lottery, who can come in and take your place and immediately do that work? Because a lot of you, when I work with you in strategic planning sessions, the answer is no SOPs. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Addressing ordinances. Addressing ordinances are incredibly critical. If you want to fix the problems that are in your community, and I know you have them because I've seen them and they keep me up at night. Yeah, I mean, some of your addressing ordinances, I'm pretty sure were like printed on papyrus paper or something. Daniel, yeah, you try every day to win the lotto. Yeah, and I'm actually in the process right now of writing an addressing standard for not a standard, but a best practices document for one of our state clients. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. We can also recommend training opportunities and then make recommendations for staffing going forward. Yeah, Jenny, a lot of ordinances are way old and out of date and still with that E911 mentality. So yeah, NG9-1-1 definitely makes us take a second look at a third look and a fourth at how we're managing a lot of different things. Yes, things are ambiguous. Absolutely, Daniel. All right, so I have 6 minutes for questions. Sorry, I kind of rushed through. I'm a little rusty. Does the 72 hours count during holidays and weekends? Sean, I am not entirely sure. From what I remember in that standard, it doesn't specify. It just says 72 hours. I think the assumption was that it was business hours, but I don't know for sure. Oh, Matt, bless you. Thank you. I am rusty for sure, but I'm so happy that I could join you guys. I appreciate you guys so much. And I will tell you, you're all doing a really good job. I like to tell people this, and you're all doing a fantastic job. A lot of you have been just kind of dropped into these positions and you don't have a lot of like guidance or resources. And I'm just so happy to see that you're here and willing to learn with me. And I am, yes, thank you, Deborah, because I'm too busy yapping. Hang on, at mbakerintl.com. I usually put it at the end, Annie.Cahill at mbakerintl.com. Okay, so that is, David, if you can send me a screenshot of that issue that you're talking about, I would be happy to, because it's not like a one size fits all kind of answer. Does anybody have any other questions? But yeah, feel free to email me. And again, please be patient because I do travel quite a bit. I will be in Alabama next week. But I'll be home the week after. So just please be patient. Yeah, no question is too basic. I mean, I'm happy to help you guys with anything. So I'll hang on for another 4 minutes if you guys need anything. I don't know. Yeah, by the way, we have how many agencies create an ESN layer in GIS? Yeah. Do you guys have ESNs? Hopefully you do. Daniel, just reach out to me and I can explain it to you. It's called an ACE, which is an address comparison evaluation. We take local data sets and we bounce them off the master and we identify potentially missing addresses. Oh, well, I'll put my email again. Sorry, guys. Yes, so we will take local data and basically bounce it off the master, and then we will identify potentially missing address candidates. Oh, Adriana, bless you. I don't know about enthusiasm because I am a little low energy today. Yeah, the email, I don't know why it's not showing. Let me do this. Give me just a second. Let me pop it in here.
You sent it to only the moderators.
Okay, well see, let me put it on the slide. Hang on.
I'll put it into.
Share my screen. Is it sharing?
Yes. There you go.
Sorry. Annie.Cahill, CAHILL at mbakerinTL.com. Sorry about that. Advice for a department of one. Yeah, I mean, start now, start early. Depending on how much data management you have to do. If you're doing a lot of editing, then you would want to validate more often. With our validation software, you can actually schedule validations. So you can set it up to run, weekly, bi-weekly, whatever that looks like for you. And then, just kind of work through a process of how to clean that up. I will say that if you hire someone to clean up your data, whether it's us or someone else, you will be at a really good place where you can just resume ongoing maintenance of that GIS data. And it will take you hardly any time at all to clean up those anomalies once it's been cleaned up into a good place. But if you need more info about that, let me know, and I'm happy to get you connected. We can have a conversation. I'm happy to look at your data and kind of tell you, where you're starting with your data quality, and that's a free service. ESNs are created by a telephone company. A good SOP. Yeah, they're few and far between for sure. If you want one written, we can do that too. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks, everyone.